Check, check. 1, 2. Check, check. 1, 2. Yeah.
Good evening. Welcome to the February 12th regular meeting of the Board of Education of Rockville Center School District. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Emergency evacuation exits are on either side in the back. Any correspondence that can be posted has been posted. Is Callie here? Okay. Hi, Callie. Can't see you, John. Hi. Welcome. It's your opportunity for student board member.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Here's my report for this month's meeting. The SGA and I are finalizing the school-wide survey, which should be out shortly. After that, I'll begin analyzing the information I get, which I'm very excited for. I've had very informative meetings and conversations with Dr. Walsh, Dr. Viteri, and Mr. Gavin, and I look forward to having this information to present to the board. 2 weeks ago, counselors pushed into social studies classes to help students select courses for next school year. Students will have the opportunity to be a part of brand new classes next year, including AP Cybersecurity, Unified Science, and AP World History, which I'm sure many students are very excited about. I just wanted to give a special thank you to our counselors for aiding us in this course selection and for all their help during this busy time of year. Earlier today, the SJ met with Dr. Walsh and had a great discussion regarding some concerns SJ had with student emails and as well as availability in the student senior parking lot. Any changes in this area would likely be minor, but would greatly improve the day-to-day experience for students. So I'll make sure to keep the board up to date on any potential changes that may arise over the upcoming months. And finally, just some upcoming events for the community to look forward to. Red and Blue is the end of this month, so make sure to come watch and support our girls. Everyone has been putting in so much work, and it's so exciting to finally see everything coming together. Also, the spring musical Chicago is at the very end of March, so make sure to get tickets for that and come support all of the Drama Guild's hard work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Callie. Next on the agenda is opportunity for students. Are there any students in the audience that would like to come and address the board at this time? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Gavin, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Barry. Tonight for our Superintendent's report, we have a presentation which is a continuation of a discussion at our last meeting where we presented the tax cap calculation. After identifying the projected gap for this year's budget, the board asked us to prepare a presentation for tonight that outlines the process and potential scenarios for ways to potentially close the budget gap. So tonight, we will outline the process and some potential scenarios for what it would look like if we determined to pierce the cap. We will review our recent budget history, outline the process and timeline for the budget, and the goal of our budget. Tonight's presentation is a time for consideration and discussion. We do not need a decision tonight from the board about whether or not we will pierce the cap. We will need direction from the board at the February 28th board meeting so that we can prepare the cap that we have to submit what our tax cap will be to New York State by March 1st. So right now we don't need a decision. Tonight is for discussion and consideration. The tax cap calculation can and could be revised after the March 1st submission, but I just wanted to let everyone know that there's the timeline that we are responsible for submitting that tax cap to there as well. So at this point, I'd like to turn our attention to the presentation, and we'll get started for the presentation this evening. So tonight, we're going to talk about our budget going back to last year. So last year, we needed to close a gap of about $3.5 million due to insurance costs, contractual obligations, and special education costs. And what I mean by special education costs is a number of factors, and we'll talk about that later on. So what did we do to close that? So we identified efficiencies in our transportation, we accessed an administrator, and we did not replace anyone that retired last year. We were able to close the gap last year, but that led us to running a tight gap this year. We anticipated and projected an additional gap for this year. So as we tried to plan into it, we have cut down on overtime. We have offered a retirement incentive to our units. We have reduced 8 additional TA positions in August, reduced a custodial position, one clerical position mid-year, and we have frozen all spending as of December. So that's what we did last year, planning into this year. The process for this year is the consideration and the talk about the tax cap calculation, the tax levy calculation. Next meeting after tonight's meeting, so tonight we're going to talk about what it would look like if we pierce the cap. Next meeting, we're going to talk about on the 25th, which is our typical budget calendar situation where we talk about revenue, what our sources of revenue are, capital work, and administration. On March 12th, we're going to do the budget presentation on instruction and special education. On the 26th, we will do arts and athletics. And on the 16th, we have our preliminary budget hearing where we adopt the budget. On May 7th, we have our budget hearing, and then later in May, we have our budget vote. So that's the process. So I want to make clear tonight that we're not talking about any sort of changes to program or reductions in staff this evening. That's not what we're talking about. We will have those conversations about changes to program or in terms of the way we offer program or the way that we deliver program on March 12th. So that is the timeline for that. So I don't want anyone to think we're going to talk about anything in terms of reductions or anything in terms of change for program for this evening. We are going to talk about this evening what it would look like if we decided to pierce the cap. And we would need the board, we would need to get a recommendation from us where the board would have to consider that. So in terms of what the goal of our budget is, we want to make sure that we prepare a budget that is aligned with our mission, that supports the outstanding programs that we've been able to deliver for students. And you're going to hear me say this a lot over the course of the next few months. It has to be fiscally responsible and it has to be sustainable. What do I mean by sustainable? I cannot prepare a budget that allows for a program for 1 year. We have to think about how it can be sustained over time. So we don't want to just come out and say, hey, by the way, we just fixed the problem for now, and we're going to have the same problem again next year. So that's what I mean when I talk about the term sustainable. So tonight, I'm going to ask Ms. Rehak to talk a little bit about what it would look like, what the process is if we pierce the cap. So starting with this, I'll turn it over to Ms. Rehak.
Thank you. Before we go into different variations of what piercing the cap looks like, I'm just going to go over some of the things we really did last time, just as an update and to reiterate a couple items. So the first thing, as you know, we discussed last time what our revenue budget is based on a tax levy increase, based on the cap calculation, state aid where that is, and our other revenue sources. And that was at just about $141 million. Our proposed expenditure budget, if we rolled everything over and put in what a lot of wish lists were, it was $147 million. So we were looking at a budget gap of about $6.5 million. As Mr. Gavin mentioned, we did anticipate this. We spoke about this last year with the budget. We did have a gap last year, and in anticipation of that, we met over the summer and discussed retirement incentives. Those incentives, fortunately, did bring us savings of about $2.7 million. So now our remaining gap is about $3.7 million. So just a couple of the drivers of the budget this year. We talked about our expenditures have been going up. We'll look at inflation as compared to the tax cap, what we're allowed to increase our tax levy. We also have spoken about health insurance a lot. Health insurance has been going up significantly from year to year. This past January, we did get an increase of between 8 and 9%. So we do have in the budget a 10% increase for health insurance. We also have our contractual obligations. As Mr. Gavin mentioned, we do have an increase in our out-of-district placements and their related tuition and services, so that is a driver of the budget. And on the flip side, we also have things affecting our revenues. So we spoke about a decrease in our non-resident tuition that we bring in for out-of-district students that come in for some of our special education programs. That has decreased. We know the needs of students have increased, and most districts have had a need to create their own programs at this point. So where you used to see a lot of districts send kids out and they would come to Rockville Center for that program, now the number of their students has increased as well, that it's forced them to create a lot of their own programs and keep kids in-house as much as they can. But for us, that's decreased our revenue from the outside. Also, we spoke about state aid. Rockville Center is a district, we're a safe, harmless district, which means that if they run the foundation aid formula straight the way it is, our state aid would go down. There is right now in the governor's budget a 1% minimum increase, so that's what we're expected to get right now, a 1% increase. Last year in the budget, they had a 2% minimum increase, and that is what we got last year as a safe, harmless district. So that's what we've included in the budget. And then one of the other things is appropriated fund balance, which we spoke at length last time about fund balance and reserves. Appropriated fund balance is when we had money left over at the end of the year, we would appropriate it towards the next year's budget. Because last year we had this gap to close, and we had to budget a lot of those things you don't typically budget, like the breakage or, you know, maybe retirements that you don't replace. We really had to budget all that to close the gap, which we knew we were going to be on a much tighter budget, which in turn has affected the amount we can appropriate now to 26, 27. So I know we went over that last time, but I just wanted to touch upon a little bit of again. This was, this is a comparison of the tax levy cap and the levy growth factor and the inflation factor. You could see over the past few years that orange bar is the inflation factor. It's gone up a lot over the past few years. We all know that. We feel that in our homes as well with utilities, supplies, equipment. The school districts are no different. So while all those expenditures are going up, we're still only limited to the lesser of inflation, or 2%, in how we raise our taxes. Very good for taxpayers. As a taxpayer, I appreciate that, but it becomes very challenging for school districts, especially in times when inflation is high. So it's something that we have to get creative in how we build our budgets each year to contend with that. So just to review the tax cap calculation, there was some changes from the last time we met. As we said, this is fluid, and there may be changes over the course of the month. One of the changes was we did receive a new pilot. We received a new pilot last week, and that has to reduce our tax levy calculation. So when we last met, it was a 2.45% tax cap, and now it's down to 2.06%. For our revenue budget, it will stay the same because our pilot revenue will go up while the tax levy will go down. So net on our budget, it's the same, but it does affect the tax cap in a good way for taxpayers because it reduces it from that 2.45 to 2.06%. So the tax cap calculation, we start with our prior year levy, 25-26, which was $109 million. We then multiply that by our tax-based growth factor. This is a factor that comes from New York State, is a flat 1 for 26-27. This is based on real property physical growth within your district. Then we have to adjust the prior year levy. We have to add back the pilots we removed, which was 1.6 million, and we have to subtract our exemptions to come up with an adjusted 25-26 levy. Those prior year exemptions are our capital exemptions, so that's our transfer to capital, our debt service, and net with our building aid that we receive. So our adjusted levy is 107.3 million. Then we multiply that by the levy growth factor. This is where that lesser of inflation, or 2%, comes into play. So inflation is over the 2%, so this will be limited to 2%, and that brings us to 109.4 million. Then we have to subtract the pilots we expect to receive for 26-27. So this was the number that changed from last time, and that's 1.5 million, and that brings us to 107.9 million. And then we add in our projected exemptions. This includes a transfer to capital, our debt service, less the building aid we expect to receive. Right now, this includes a transfer to capital of 2 million, and we'll go into how that impacts the tax cap calculation and different variations of that in the next few slides. But I just wanted to just go over a little bit, which we also touched upon last time. Why would we transfer to capital, especially when we're talking about reductions and things like that? We know we have to maintain our buildings. Our buildings are over 100 years old. Also, when you take a transfer to capital out of this calculation, and you'll see this in the next few slides, it doesn't say, okay, well, we're not going to do capital work of 2 million. You can apply it against your general fund budget. That's not how it works. It actually just reduces the amount you levy unless you pierce the cap, which is what we'll talk about. So you can't just use that levy to offset the general fund budget. It's an exemption to the tax cap calculation. And you'll also see when you change that from year to year, how that impacts the bottom line increase to taxpayers. We also know, we've talked about this in strategic planning, that we have building aid falling off a few years from now, and when that building aid falls off, what'll happen is the tax levy cap will spike. It'll go higher. And even though it's within the cap, if you have a tax levy cap that's 5 or 6%, you may not be able to pass a budget, even though you're within a cap. So that's something we have to, looking out and looking forward, plan for. So one of the things we discussed in strategic planning was using this transfer to capital and maybe slowly increasing it very gradually from year to year, that when that building aid falls off, we can drop the transfer to capital to keep the levy at a reasonable level and flat year after year, which we've done over the past several years as well. So you can never look at the tax cap calculation in 1 year. You always have to look at multiple years to really see the impact. The decisions you make today affect next year's levy. It really does, it's not 1 year alone. So, and then the last reason we talk about transfer to capital, as you know, we do not have a reserve for capital. So since we don't have a reserve for capital, this is really how we get our capital projects done from year to year and maintain our buildings. So it's important to maintain that within our budget each year. Of course, we also talked about in strategic planning building a capital reserve. Right now, that may not be something we'll be able to do in the short term, so it's even more important that we maintain some sort of transfer to capital to maintain our properties. So this is just the tax cap calculation over the last 5 years. You can see it's really ranged from about 2% to 2.6%, and as I mentioned before, right now we're at 2.06%. Okay, so what does piercing the cap look like? What are the required procedures for piercing the cap? If we do exceed the cap calculation, we do need at least 60% voter approval, so it's 60% plus 1 vote, and that's a supermajority as opposed to a simple majority vote, which we typically see from year to year, which is over 50%. The board would formally pass a resolution stating their intent to override the tax levy limit before the budget vote takes place. And on the ballot itself, the budget proposition would also clearly state that the adoption requires a tax levy increase that exceeds the statutory cap and requires the supermajority vote. We are required to report our calculation to the state, to the comptroller's office. This we do every year regardless. As Mr. Gavin said, this is due March 1st. Now, I can take the tax cap as we have it now, and I can upload that to the state. It just has to be submitted by March 1st, but after March 1st, you have plenty of time to adjust it or make changes or revisions. So if we're not talking about program or those changes until March 12th, that's okay. We can adjust the tax levy cap calculation if that's what the board chooses to do after that time. Okay. The budget notice, which we also do every year, that would be sent to residents. That's the 6-day notice. It's done 6 days before the vote, and that would also have to state on it that we are exceeding the cap and require a 60% vote. If the budget were to fail to get 60%, then it's just like if any budget were to fail, even if you needed a simple majority, you can either go out for a revote in June, or you can adopt a contingency budget. In June, you can choose to put out the same budget that would still need, if you're piercing the cap, a 60% supermajority. You can reduce the budget, you can stay within the cap, and then it would need only a simple majority of 50%. If that budget in June, if you put something out for a revote failed, then you would automatically go on a contingent budget, which means the tax levy stays flat from the prior year. Okay, so now we're going to go into a few different variations. You can really do hundreds of variations, so I tried to just do a few so you can see the impact that this has on the levy. And after I go through them, there'll be a summary slide so you can just compare the few scenarios that I had. So the first one is a calculation with the $2 million transfer to capital. This is where the calculation stands right now on that left column of 2627. So you can see at the bottom, it's 2.06%, and the increase in levy is 2.2 million. On the right-hand side, I take that and I rolled it into the next year, 27-28, to see if everything stayed relatively the same, our pilots, our debt service, our building aid, what would my tax levy increase be next year? And it's 1.96%. So it still stays around that 2%. That's also assuming that inflation is still at 2%. So that would be also 4.02% over 2 years of a tax levy increase. The next slide looks at if we were to pierce the cap and close the full $3.7 million gap, what would that look like? So if we kept the whole calculation the same, including the $2 million transfer to capital, and I'll go through one next without that transfer, but if we kept that the same, you can see the maximum allowable levy is 2.06%. If I added that full 3.7 million to what we levied in taxes, it would go up to 5.47%. We would need a supermajority vote for that. We'd need the 60% plus one, and the levy increase would be 5.47. But now we have to see, how does that impact the next year? It stays the same as it did in the last one. You still have that $2 million transfer to capital. Your tax levy increase for the next year will be 1.96. So over the 2-year period, you closed that gap at 3.7 in this year, and the increase was 7.43% over 2 years, and you did $4 million of capital work. Now, closing the gap may not be solving the problem, so that's something that we have to consider as well. But just to close the gap and see what that looks like, that's what it is. The next calculation is if we did zero transfer to capital, what happens? And before I even talk about the piercing the cap and closing the gap with it, if you just look on that left-hand side, if we did no transfer to capital and did nothing else and left the calculation as is, the maximum allowable levy increase is 0.23%. That's the cap. So then if we said, well, we're not going to do the 2 million transfer to capital, but we want to add 3.7 million to what we levy, so the net is adding 1.7 million, that would bring the tax levy increase to 3.64%. But it does exceed the cap, which is now 0.23%, and you would need that supermajority, okay? Now, if you take that and you fast forward to next year, by removing that transfer to capital, you've now impacted the next year levy. It's no longer that 1.96. Now, it goes up to 3.77 next year, because when you try to build back in that transfer to capital, it spikes it. So now you're at 3.77. So over the 2-year period, with the zero transfer to capital, but closing the gap, it's 7.41% over 2 years, which is very similar to what we saw on the last slide. But instead of getting $4 million transfer to capital, you're only getting $2 million of capital work. So there is a difference in the two, and the tax increase is relatively the same to taxpayers for the total of 2 years, okay? So now if I pierce the cap and close part of the gap, I just want to make sure I'm on the right slide, yes. So if I were to pierce the cap and close, instead of 3.7 million, 2 million, and combine that with doing reductions of about 1.7 million to close the gap, this is what that would look like. Now, if we run it, the levy calculation, just like we did at the beginning, we're back at 2.06%. We add in 2 million of additional tax levy, and that brings our increase to 3.89%. Because we're over the 2.06, you still need the supermajority. And if you look at next year, because you maintain that transfer to capital, you're back to the 1.96% in year 2. So in this example, it's 5.85% over 2 years, and you've closed part of the gap with $2 million, and you have $4 million of capital work over the 2-year period. So this is just a chart summarizing the variations I did here. Like I said, there are so many different variations you can do with playing with that transfer to capital number, playing with how much or how little of the gap you would close. But this was just a few. If there's anything else that the board would like me to run, I'd be happy to do that. But here you can see those 4 different scenarios. The first one, within the cap, $3.7 million gap remaining. Second one, piercing the cap and closing the gap. The third one, piercing the cap, closing the gap with no transfer to capital in year 1. And the fourth one, piercing the cap and closing part of the gap, but having 1.7 remaining. You can see the transfer to capital that we'd have in 26-27. You can see the first one does not close the gap. The next 2 do. The last one is a partial close. In all of the 3 of the 4, we do need a supermajority, and it would pierce the cap. The first one does not pierce it. And you can see the percentages for 26-27 tax levy increase. The first one, that 2.06, going up to 5.47, 3.64, and 3.89. I also added the next year's estimated tax levy increase, so you have it, and totaled it for 2 years, what it would be for taxpayers. So it ranges from 4.02% to 7.43%. So our next steps, some of which we've already been doing and we're going to continue to do over the next couple weeks, we've been having our administrative scheduling meetings to build our 2026-27 programs, and with that, doing a staffing analysis based on the finalized schedules and programs and the student need, so what we need to meet the programs as we build them. Continuing to refine the tentative budget and the assumptions that we have in there, ongoing public presentations and transparent communication, of course, board review of all of this so you have informed decision-making, and the commitment to responsible budgeting that supports our students. So that was everything I had. I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. Rehak. Just to be clear, the board asked you just 2 weeks ago to kind of run these options through. We have not suggested at all that we are looking or intending to pierce the cap. We asked you to give us and present tonight to the board and to the community different options. So thank you for all of the work. I know it's been a lot of work and tremendously thorough in terms of your explanation, and I appreciate that. We also asked you to consider and include the transfer to capital question, because that's something that came up. And the reality is that our buildings are old and need a lot of attention. And something that we've been discussing prior to this was looking at, you know, what needed to be done in terms of each building. And every year we try to do some capital work in each building. So it's something that comes up this time every year. But in this year in particular, it's important to explain the difference and what we can use that money for and what we can't use that money for. So I appreciate you highlighting that tonight as well. At this time, I'll turn it over for questions or comments from the board.
Thank you. Certainly, since the tax cap has been instituted, the Rockville Center school budget has come in under it, and we take pride in that. We're not looking to, as you said, make any decisions, but we did ask for these scenarios, and I think it's important to note that what we do needs to be sustainable, that it needs to not just think about balancing the budget in terms of revenues and expenditures for next year, but how decisions we make will have a tremendous impact on our tax cap, our community, and certainly when we want to preserve the programs that we know are successful for students. One of the questions about revenue that we talked a little bit about in our last meeting has to do with state aid. I see you have it sort of projected to be flat in these various scenarios, mentioning that we are one of the districts in New York State that is now on this hold harmless or save harmless provision. Can you explain a little bit for the audience who might not have heard last week's or last meeting's discussion about the foundation aid formula? So that's where questions about declining enrollment play a role, right? The declining enrollment doesn't impact the tax base or that part of the revenue, but certainly last year we were able to get a 2% increase in our foundation aid from New York State. Right now we're expecting a 1%, and that's based on outdated data. It's based on information that's not the conditions that we're operating in right now.
Yeah, sure. So the foundation aid formula, yes, our enrollment plays a part in that formula. So as enrollment declines, the amount that we get in aid goes down. Another factor of that formula is the wealth ratio. So the wealth ratio in Rockville Center has gone up, and what's that's based on is based on home property sales. So the cost, I'm sure as most people know, the average home in Rockville Center about 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, was about $550,000. And now the average home in Rockville Center is about $920,000. So that impacts the foundation aid formula as well. So as enrollment goes down and wealth ratio goes up, that makes our overall foundation aid go down. Another thing was a couple of years ago, prior to last year, they were using 2000 census data for all these numbers, and they updated it with last year's state aid formula. So by updating it, that also greatly impacted the foundation aid formula for us, because as we know, these numbers have changed greatly. So one of the things the governor did last year was she put in a 2% minimum in the state budget. She put that in January in the governor's budget, and the legislative budget, they adopted it. So there was a 2% minimum of foundation aid for districts like us that it would have gone down. It would have decreased. This year in her budget, she put in a 1% minimum. So I don't, when the legislation budget passes in April, it could change, it could go up, maybe they'll make it the 2% again. Last year, they kept it at the 2%. Usually, a lot of districts will do a little better with the legislative budget than the governor's budget, but considering they kept the minimum the same, I wouldn't want to factor that in, really not knowing. But, so that's what we're looking at, 1%. The other aids are expense-based aids, and we have been, as we said, we've really done a lot with transportation. So while our transportation costs have gone down, our transportation aid will go down as well. So things like that also impact our overall aid, which has made it stay pretty flat. And when I say they went down, transportation costs go up for CPI, but we brought other costs down. We did consolidate some buses, we did reduce our hour usage, things like that. The net to the district is positive, is good. Our expenses went down more than our aid went down, but there was also an impact to the aid, so the aid has stayed a little flat.
And many of our expenses are mandated by the state, and they are expenses over which we do not have a tremendous amount of control, and in some cases, they change mid-year, right? In the
Yes.
case of,
Yes, a lot of, and unfunded mandates, a lot of them too, so when that happens too, we have to do a lot of things and pay for a lot of things that we will not get aid back for.
so we're advocating
Yep.
with our local electeds to try to have the state either adjust this formula or figure out a better minimum so that so many districts that are in this position with rising expenses and a 1% increase is not meeting even the expenses the state is requiring us to pay.
Correct.
Right. And I just want to just point out that if people didn't see the presentation from last meeting, where we talked specifically about what our enrollment has done over the last 10 years, we're 288 students down from where we were 10 years ago, district-wide. So that's about an 8% reduction of students over the course of 10 years. So 10 years ago to now, we've lost, in terms of total enrollment, about 288 students. This is relatively consistent with what we've seen on Long Island as a whole, because if you look at roughly the same 10-year gap on Long Island, I had to do slightly different in terms of the years. The years weren't exactly matched up, but you're still looking island-wide at about 7.3, 7.5% reduction in enrollment island-wide. So we're a little bit over what that would be, but we're right on line with what we have seen just island-wide. One of the other things that we reviewed too was the impact in terms of private schools. So we looked at private school enrollment from 10 years ago and private school enrollment now. And they've also seen a reduction in terms of Rockville Center students. It doesn't mean that if there are students from other districts that we're counting in that analysis. We're counting Rockville Center students only. They've seen a reduction in terms of the private school in town, and I'm talking about anywhere we send anyone from high school, whether that's Chaminade, Sacred Heart, Kellenberg, the Latin School, St. Agnes. They've seen a reduction in terms of Rockville Center students of about 14%. So I don't want anyone to think that we've lost enrollment to other options. We have less students in Rockville Center. And I think that was important if people hadn't seen that presentation last night, that also factors into our state aid, as Jackie said. The other component with that is the wealth ratio, and some of the costs that we have seen rise like every homeowner has, right? Construction costs, anything you do for construction from 5 years ago is up anywhere from 30 to 50%. And I'm probably being conservative. If you've done any work on your house, you know what I'm talking about, right? Energy costs have gone up. So when we look at all of those components, those are things that are not within our control. And I also want to make clear that, we talk about insurance. When we talk about insurance costs, we're talking about employee health insurance. So the big increase that Ms. Rehak has talked about is employee health insurance. So I just wanted to make sure there's several different types of insurance. One is liability insurance, and one is health insurance. Health insurance, we anticipate if we get what we've been getting, which is around a 7 to 8% increase in health insurance, we're budgeting 10 to be conservative. That is about $2 million. Just on health insurance, just the cost. So I just wanted to reiterate some of those things in terms of, for people that weren't here last time, that those are some of the discussions that we've had. The presentation we did last meeting is also online, and you can watch it not only on YouTube, but you can see the presentation materials as well. So if anyone has any questions about that or has any follow-up questions, we're happy to answer. Sorry.
No, thank you. And the question that we asked for tonight was to walk us through possible scenarios, what it would look like, and so when our budget stays under the tax cap, as it historically has, that is a supermajority, right? Or no, that is a regular, simple majority, simple majority. So a supermajority, if we were to override that tax cap, it would be obvious on the ballot. And the difference between that, if that budget were to fail versus if a tax cap budget were to fail,
It's the same process. You can either go out for a revote in June or automatically adopt a contingency budget. If you go out for a revote in June, you can put the same budget out, you can adjust it, you can, and again, if you pierce the cap, it's supermajority. If you don't, it's simple majority. If the June budget fails, you have to adopt a contingent budget at that point.
at that point. Okay, thank you.
And Dr. Downing, just to reiterate the first point that you made regarding foundation aid formula and what's within our control and what is out of our control. And we'll get to this later, I'm sure, but one thing that we can do as a board, in addition to administration, is advocating to our legislators. We also talked about this at the last meeting, in terms of looking at the foundation aid formula and how it's calculated and advocating to show that Long Island isn't really getting its fair share in terms of what we're putting into
Absolutely.
the state. Thank you.
Thanks again, as always. Very clear, very understandable. Just as a preface, so Dr. Downing and I both attended a virtual Capitol conference on Friday, which was hosted by NYSBA, and basically there was different portions of the presentation that spoke with the Commissioner of Education, state senators and assemblymen that are responsible for the Education Committee and advocating for education interests within the larger legislative budget, people from the governor's office, and one of my takeaways, at least, so consistently across the board, everybody, at least from Long Island, thinks that the 1% increase is really not a fair assessment of where costs are on the island compared to, you know, the revenue that we're able to bring in. So that is something that virtually every district and NYSBA's advocacy arm is really trying to push the legislators to realize, and they do realize it. I also think it's interesting, so the governor has her budget that she's trying to balance, and her costs are up, like her Medicare costs are significantly higher this year. So, and it seems like when she's allocating her funds, more money is going towards higher need areas, whether that's rural areas who are really feeling a crunch for different reasons, or more urban areas. But the fact of the matter is she's splitting her pie in a different way than we're looking for her to split it. And fairly or not, the perception is that people in places like Rockville Center are better able to afford picking up the slack on what is not coming in from the state. And any of us sitting here know that, yes, we make more, but we also spend more, and costs are higher. So it's, depending on your perspective, is like you take a different approach to where the dollars should go. But I will just say, just generally speaking, it's very hard for, it feels very hard for a school to only be reliant upon a 1% increase from the state or a 2% increase from the tax cap when expenditures are rising faster than that. So I appreciate at least the options, and I think all of us, we just want to consider all the options. It's not a good, we're not in a good situation, we all acknowledge that, but we want to look at all the options that we have and try to make the best decision for the students, for the district, for the community as a whole, right? My specific question, if you go to the second, where you're piercing the cap and closing the gap, right, in next year's calculation, that would be a 5.47% increase. Do you have a sense of what that dollar amount would be on average for a homeowner, or no?
No, not yet. So we get the assessments at the first week of April, and at that point, I do run what the tax cap increase is per average household in Rockville Center, and that gets included on our budget brochure that gets mailed out right after the budget's adopted in April. I mean, I can run it based on old numbers, prior year numbers, but it does, with assessments, things can change from year to year, and tax rates can be a little funky based on how the assessment is run. So I don't want to put something out there that's just not accurate.
Okay, fair enough. As we get closer, maybe if we could just have a very loose ballpark, just so we know what we're talking about in terms of the individual impact.
Sure.
The other question I had is, you had also said in relation to this slide that closing the gap might not solve the problem. So could you just speak a little bit about what you meant by that?
So closing the gap, yes, it does balance our budget, and so we'd be good for this year, but our costs will continue to compound next year if we don't start cutting costs and trying to build in some cushion. And also the next year, when we look at what came in this year, we know about our contractual increases. We knew about those. We were able to plan for them by doing retirement incentives and things like that. The things we don't know about, we don't know how many kids are going to come in that require out-of-district placements, high tuition and services, and mid-year, midstream, we always put in some contingencies for that, but we did go way past our contingencies this year. So that's an unknown you can only put in so much cushion for that, and when you blow through that, it's very hard to mitigate that. The other thing is health insurance. Yes, I'm budgeting for 10%. I would like to be able to budget only an 8% increase or a 6% increase, but it's just been running that high. Now, if it comes in at 10%, again, we're on a very tight budget. We have really no extras anywhere. We're not putting money away. We went into detail last time on our reserves and where they stand and how we use them, and fund balance and where that stands and how we use it. So, and one of the things that we talked about when doing strategic planning is there are a lot of reserves we do not have. So when things come up like this, it's very difficult for us to mitigate that. We talked about, we have an ERS reserve, we have a TRS reserve. We use it. We use it every year. We put it in the budget to balance the budget to use it. We can only use it to the extent we have ERS and TRS. That's the retirement system, employee retirement system, and teacher retirement system expenses. We don't have an unemployment reserve. We don't have a workers' compensation reserve. We don't have insurance reserves. We don't have capital reserves. So these reserves we talked about in our strategic plan that we'd like to build up. Very hard to do that when you're working on a really tight budget. There's not really anything left over at the end of the year to do that. And I'm not suggesting that while we're reducing that we start putting money away. That's not what I'm suggesting. But we have to look at things long term and start kind of trying to build that back in. But if we don't make any reductions and we continue, it's just going to keep happening. We're just really kicking the can.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. And my last question. So on the slide that had like the summary of all the variations, you said, if we wanted to look at some other options. So I don't have any particular option I'm looking for at the moment, but as we start to have these conversations in the next few meetings, if we could, most likely we will ask you to just give us some other options that we might want to consider. So, just for future reference, we'll look at it step by step and go from there.
Right, so, and that's why I wanted to make clear that March 1st, I have to upload a calculation, but it's definitely not set in stone. You can adjust it. I mean, your tax levy can adjust actually for months. It's not really set in stone until actually August of the year. Not that people do that once you adopt a budget. We set it in stone, but with respect to the comptroller, it goes on. So March 1st, I will submit something, but then as these conversations continue, we'll make any adjustments as you see fit.
And then once we adopt the budget, that's the cap we're living.
For us, yes, for us.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. I think, want to reiterate, because we have a crowd tonight, we really didn't the last time, but agree that we should go back to go forward. I think last meeting's presentation was really comprehensive and answers a lot of questions people may have. You brought up the fund balance, you brought up things tonight kind of quickly, but we did go deep into those things, so we don't want anybody to feel that we're just kind of like rolling over it. But because we try to stick to this kind of process, I think it's important for everybody to kind of get everything, every piece of this as we move forward. It's a transparent process. I think, tonight it's a public meeting. We have the mic open, but we will have the mic open every single meeting during the budget process, always opening it, right, even when it's a public work session. So we would care what people have to say, and it helps us kind of frame where the community stands. Couple of observations. I mean, some of these calculations look complicated. It's complicated math in some ways, and the calculations. And then there's the simple math that just doesn't work out. An 8% inflation 2 years ago with very little, impact for us in terms of what we're being given year over year. That's simple math. It doesn't work out. Increases in insurance that we can't control. In low enrollment, that's a higher education problem as well. I work in higher ed. The birth dearth is a real problem. Higher ed is seeing it. We're seeing it. Sometimes we don't see it particularly one year over the other, but it is, people can look into that. That's a true thing in the wealth ratio. I think that these are all things, it becomes a perfect storm. What really strikes me so much is that when people hear the term pierce the cap, it becomes a scary and vast territory. You could pierce the cap at 2.1%, or you could pierce it at 10%. And I think that we are all very conscious about what that would look like and mean. So I appreciate the scenarios, because it's not a one, pierce the cap is just this big term that you say or use and hope for your supermajority, and it just works out. But I think we would have to consider at what levels, that would look like. So this is really helpful, because it's not so simple to just say, what does it look like to pierce the cap? There's so many options. I think one of the biggest takeaways we need to have as a board is what you said about sustainability, but it's really hard to have foresight with volatility. And I think, and I said this to you last meeting, I'm going to say it again, I appreciate the foresight you've had so far, but just thinking about that inflation rate is very scary, and how much it went up and down, probably will go up again. So not only dealing with a problem you have in the moment of what are we going to do about this budget, but having the foresight to think that that can happen again at any time. Your point about out-of-district placements and things that we can't possibly always know to the penny of how to, look ahead for, that I think has to be a big concern of the board, and just for sustainability, but also control. So I hope everybody stays with us as we go through the process. I think that we have lots of questions. I think people should ask their questions, and I hope people get information here, because we want to make sure that people feel educated as we go through the process. It's complicated, and there's lots of boxes to check off here. So we're on a good start, and I appreciate you and how well you have explained everything and laid it out. But I know there's a lot to consider, so I just want to say thank you.
Thank you again for the presentation. I really appreciate the information. Again, I think it's very clear, and I appreciate the options that you've kind of laid out regarding the tax cap. I think I'm kind of sitting in a similar place. Obviously we have to close this gap, and I'm not really sure how we do that in the moment. But my larger concern is that this gap doesn't show up again. And I think that's really where I'm sitting right now, and thinking about what are like the systemic issues that we have that have gotten us here, and how do we make sure this doesn't happen again. And like, I hear everything you're saying. I hear that we have increase in insurance. I hear that we have increase in energy. Our wealth ratio has gone up. Our special ed costs have gone up. But I feel like this is true for so many Long Island school districts. Like, we're not unique in this position, but we are in a unique position that we're hit very hard in this moment. And I think that's something I'm having a hard time reconciling and understanding. And I will 100% admit that while I work in education, budget is not my wheelhouse. So when I'm sitting here and I'm listening, I'm trusting the experts. I'm listening to what you're telling me. I'm trying to make decisions based on what I'm hearing, but I don't have the foundational knowledge or skill
to really be able to dig deeper into this. So I've tried to go back, I've tried to look at our past budgets, I've tried to align things, and I think there are a couple of things that I need to help me be a more informed board member and be a part of this process. So there are 4 things I would like, if possible. I'd like to see a current appropriation status for the 25-26 school year. That's essentially, for those appropriation statuses I do know, is what we budgeted for and how much we've actually spent. So like what's left over in that budget. If we could get a fund balance report, I don't know that we've seen one, or if we have, maybe I've just missed it in our board packet, but I would really like to see that. And then once we have the budget line item for 26, 27, if we could get a comparative, like on the same spreadsheet of what that line was in 25, 26, going back like 4 years or so. Again, just so I can see the comparative, that will kind of help me understand like where spending is spiked, so I can ask better questions about why these things have happened. And I'm also curious for out-of-district placements in special ed. Like, I understand that we can't predict who is going to move into the school district, what their needs are going to be, and what those expenses are. And for some children, it is very expensive. But I would like, I understand that that is up significantly. I'd like to know what percentage it's up by. Like, is it up 50%, 70%, 20%? I just would like to know what that percent is, and that if every dollar of what we're budgeting for that is associated with a child's tuition. Like, is there any, like are there contingencies in there? How much contingency is in there? So those are things I think that would be helpful for me moving forward. And then one question related to special ed that I have now, if there is any money left over in that out-of-district expenditure line, where does that money go? Does it go into general fund? Can we put it into the capital fund?
So, it doesn't go to capital fund. That would have to be part of the budget as a transfer to capital. At the end of the year, every month I do fund balance projections, so I'd be happy to get you that. But the purpose of fund balance projections is actually to project what you're gonna have at the end of the year so that you can appropriately put it in the right place. One of the things that Rockville Center has done from year to year is appropriate $2.8 million.
Yep.
So that means they're taking what's left over at the end of this year and putting it towards next year's budget. And it becomes a revenue line for the next year's budget. So we knew, being on a tighter budget, I'm not projecting to have $2.8 million. In fact, last year, when we were doing the projections during budget season, we reduced it to $2.4 million because I wasn't gonna have $2.8 million left over. So now this year, with what I'm projecting so far, right now I'm appropriating $1.6 million. That's essentially what is gonna have left over to balance next year's budget. Ideally, appropriated fund balance would be reduced so that you're not relying on current year funds to balance your next year's budget, and anything over and above what you appropriate from year to year, you'd be putting towards reserves. You'd get fund balance to about 4%, which is the statutory limit. Right now, we're at around 3.5, and you'd start creating other reserves, like capital reserves. So it's not a transfer to capital, but you can build capital reserves, which is a little different. Putting more towards our ERS and TRS. We went over this last time. Our TRS reserve is about a third of 1 year's TRS bill. So it's very low. You're allowed to have up to 1 year in there. That does have a statutory limit. ERS, we have, I think if I remember correctly, about 2 years worth of ERS bills in the ERS reserve. Generally speaking, industry standard is usually about 3 years or more. There are some districts that have 10 years in there, but most have at least 3 or 4. We have 2. Like I said, fund balance at 4%, start building capital reserves, putting that money into maybe workers' comp, unemployment reserves, establishing reserves, so that then when things like this happen, you have more reserves to offset different expenditures. I only have ERS and TRS, so we use that in the budget to offset those extended expenditures, but that's all I can use it for. One of our other big reserves, which really doesn't play a part in the budget, but we talked about this last time, is EBLAR, the Employee Benefit Liability Reserve. That's our biggest reserve, and that is for if everyone were to retire today, what contractually we'd have to pay. And so we do use that every year so that when people retire, we're not hitting our general fund budget for that. So that does come out of the reserve each year. You just don't actually see it in the budget because the expenditure isn't budgeted because we don't know who's going to retire. And then the revenue is from the reserve as well. So it nets zero on the budget. But yes, ideally, we'd appropriate less, have more funds left over, build some of those reserves. So then when things like this start to happen, you still plan for it, but maybe attrition and things like that can get you through it with using some of those reserves in that time when inflation is really high or you had some unexpected costs that you couldn't plan for. So ideally, that's where we'd be, and that's what we spoke about when we were doing strategic planning as well for looking long term.
No, that makes sense. I appreciate that. I just think kind of going back to the first part with, you know, where this gap is coming from and making sure that we're not in this position again. You know, I really do think we have to think about our systems. I know at our last presentation, we even just talked about looking at, you know, in our, I believe our 3rd grade and 4th grade, like how many sections we run because we have a neighborhood school model. You know, we have 250 kids in 3rd grade, which should be 10 sections, but we run 12. We have 320 kids in 4th grade, we run 13 sections. So I just think, and again, I understand that's people, I understand that it's jobs, but the system just doesn't feel sustainable to me in the time that we are living in. And I do think there's almost like kind of like a reckoning where we have to look at what matters to us as a community, what do we value, what do we want to hold on to, and then what are we willing to let go because we're holding on to those things. So I do think over, you know, obviously we need to get this budget closed, but I really do think we need to think about our systems and our structures to make sure that we're sustainable, that we're maintaining programs for kids, because at the end, it's about kids, and our kids cannot lose out on anything because of this. They just can't.
Right, so when we talked about this the last time, we took your points about what does it look like, to go back for the people in the room that weren't here the last time, we did an example of how we're configured on the elementary level and how that can sometimes drive costs. So Ms. Messier talked about the idea of we have one grade where there's 250 students. Our class size policy is 25 per student. So if I had every 3rd grader in the building at the same time, I would probably run 10 sections. Because of the way we're configured in our zoning, I'm running 11 sections for that grade. Grade 4, we actually have less students. We have 232 students, and we run 13 sections based on where those students are zoned for. So if you multiply that out on every grade, just on the elementary level, you're running an additional section, at least in every grade, if not 2 to 3. That combined with the fact that our enrollment has gone down from a typical class size of anywhere between 240 and 260 to about 250 to 220 in terms of class sizes. So we have gotten smaller, but we haven't gotten any less expensive in terms of the way we're configured. So when Ms. Messier talks about that, that's what she's talking about. She's talking about the idea of should we look at these things in terms of the way people are, the way we're zoning, what our elementary looks like in terms of configuration. The expense on the secondary side has to do with scheduling and the courses that we offer. So for example, if we offer a class that we want to enroll, we want to run because we think that students will like it, an efficient way to do it would be anywhere from 18 to 25 for students in a classroom like that. We have typically run classes smaller than that, especially for electives and special programs. So when you're talking about maintaining programs, that's one of those things that does drive cost. So for example, I'm going to use an art class, but not because I have anything against art. I love art. We've added art here, and we've added more opportunities for students. But if we have an art portfolio class that we run for 12 students because those students want to develop their portfolios potentially down the road to apply to college, that's always been a decision we've been able to say, okay, we can do that. That has a cost. It has a cost in terms of staff, and it has a cost in terms of how we schedule. So I don't want anyone to think that as we go through this process, we're not thinking about kids at all. This has to do with dollars and cents, but it also has to do with real people at the end of all of these discussions. I mean students in the classroom, but I also mean classroom teachers. I also mean support people, all of our teacher assistants, our teacher aides, our building administrators, all of the people that do the work, dedicate the time, and dedicate their care and understanding to our students for their opportunities. That is all in consideration when we do this. So I don't want anyone to think this is just about we're going to close the gap and that's it. That's not. At the end of every conversation, there is a human being, whether that's a teacher, a student, or both. So that is it's a great point that you make about kids, but that is a key point that everyone in this room needs to understand and beyond whoever is watching. So as we go through this process and as we talk about how we can reduce costs or look at the way we're configured, those kind of steps, particularly about the way we're configured, will take time. There is nothing we can do this year that would change either the zoning policy or the configuration. That would be something we would have to speak into with community dialogue. So if we were ever going to say, try to reduce the number of elementary schools so that we would be more efficient, that would be a conversation and a long-term plan that we would have to look at. And I know that the history in this community is when they've had that discussion in the past, that was not met well. And that was what the community said at the time. We don't want to close the school. We want to keep the schools as they are. So I'm aware of the history, even if I wasn't here at the time. So that's a key component, and that's why I'm saying that's not a decision we're going to make this year, and it's not a recommendation we're going to make to the board. Because we need to have that conversation, and we need to talk about what the ramifications are if we make those changes or make a recommendation for those changes. So in terms of the things you're asking for, we certainly provide a fund balance report all the time. We can give you the appropriations, that's no problem, and we can talk about the out-of-district placements. In terms of the increase, we always budget for some unanticipated students that move in. I can tell you for this year, just on a percentage, we've doubled it. So what we anticipated, we actually got double what we anticipate in terms of students that move in. So if you want to say a percentage, it's 100% more than we anticipated. That's why, that's an important thing for people to know. So every year we say, okay, we'll probably get X number of students this year that might require out-of-district tuition. We budgeted that, and historically, we've always been able to stay within that. This year is an aberration. This year we've had double than what we have budgeted. So
Yeah, just double the amount of contingencies we budgeted in. So we typically budget about 4 contingencies, and we've had more than double 4.
9. We've had 9. So in terms of that, we can give you all the things that you asked for, but I wanted to make sure.
I think I'm just
that we talked
interested in
about
like
that.
the percent increase in that line from,
Okay, so I'm just giving you like a percentage in terms of the increase.
which is
though.
fine,
Yeah.
but that's kind of what I'm interested in, and then plus however many more contingencies we're building into that. I think that's what I'm.
Right. In terms of the 26, 27 line by line, that's obviously still a moving product. So that will be something we'll have to give to you later in this process because we don't have the line by line expenditures yet because we're still in the process of trying to adopt the budget.
When about do you think that would be ready? I just feel like that would be really, like for me, like I feel like that would be very helpful, even if it's not completely done, like as it's being done. Because that's how I'm going to understand what's going on in this budget. Like I can look at all these numbers and I see the numbers, I understand the numbers, but I need to know where the numbers are coming from.
So I don't know when the best time to give that.
I
but-
mean, I think after the March 12th
Yeah.
meeting, after that meeting and some more decisions are made, it will change probably a lot after that meeting, and then I'll be able to do that.
Great, I appreciate it, thank you.
So I think the key here is communicating as we go through. Obviously, tonight, we had asked the administration to go through some options. We will continue to go through options. You make a good point in terms of our values, in terms of our community and our history, and if any change is going to be recommended and/or decided upon, it will be something that we certainly discuss here multiple times and ask for community feedback and seek community feedback before anything substantial like that happens. So, thank you. Ms. Rehak, just to close this off before we transfer over to policies, can you just go back to the timeline just in terms of, I know some people have come in since you ended your presentation during the questions and comment from board, in terms of the upcoming meetings and what specific topics we will do. You've been wonderful about giving us like a snapshot before every subcategory in budget presentations. I'm assuming you plan on doing that again, but just so everyone can see here, and obviously this will be available online as well. Just walk us through the timeline one more time in terms of the actual specific subject areas that you'll be focusing on.
Sure, and we do include this slide particularly in almost every single presentation so people can continue to see it. But February 25th, we'll review the revenue budget, and we'll also review any transfers to capital or ideas for the capital budget and equipment and the administration component of the budget. And then March 12th will be the instruction and special education component of the budget. March 26th will be athletics and the arts. And then by April 16th, we'll have the preliminary budget hearing for the board to adopt a budget.
And those will be the focus areas of the presentation to the board and the community those nights, but any questions, the budget in general, can be asked at any time. Okay, thank you again for all of your work.
Thank you.
Turning to policies tonight at stage 1, we have 5551, allocation of Title I, Part A funds in the district.
Yeah, just, we haven't looked at this in a while, not much has changed, but we just wanted to make sure it was still in compliance. And this is all overseen, we have like a ESSA committee that looks at it every year and makes sure that we are following all the things that are stipulated. So no real change.
Okay, thank you. Okay to move this at the next meeting to stage 2?
Yeah.
5660, school food service program lunch and breakfast.
Yeah, so this actually took a while to review and make sure that we were up to date with both requirements, but also district practice in terms of providing access to meals, in terms of managing students that require like alternatives, not singling kids out if they have unpaid meal charges. So we looked at this with multiple people before we put it up, even to make sure it was all based on what we're doing and also legal requirements. And so now it should be good to go.
Thank you. Okay to move this as well, stage 2?
Yes.
5661, district wellness.
So we also looked at this extensively before we put it up to the whole board, but I'm actually going to ask that we hold it
Okay.
because a question came up at the Code of Conduct meeting about like use of recess and as a disciplinary option. So we want to make sure that we're all aligned in terms of practice before we go back to approving this. The new rule from the state is that removal of recess cannot be used as a disciplinary measure. So we just wanted to make sure that it's all in alignment with our practice in the elementary and 6th grade. So if we could hold it
Okay.
until the next meeting.
That's fine, so we can make sure that that's, okay. So at the next meeting, we will have that repeat on stage 1. Ms. Celebrity, you can note that, please? Thank you. 7420, also at stage 1 this evening, we have placement program for interscholastic athletics.
Right, so this one we brought up as a request from a board member. We ran it by the director of athletics. Actually, the only significant change was in which programs are eligible for 8th grade students to try out for high school sports. And it was only practice in the past has been that if there was no team available at the middle school level, then assuming that the child was deemed to be physically able to compete, they could be eligible. But that also a key component is that the spots on the high school level teams should not be taken by middle school students because most of our teams have so many kids already from the high school trying out for them. So Mr. McGuire took a look at this and we just removed winter track as a option because there is now a winter track team at the middle school, so those students could participate at that level. That was the only.
So it was currently listed in the policy because
It
prior
was.
to
And
us
now-
adding middle school,
Correct.
we didn't, okay.
And now it's been removed.
Can I ask a question about that? I have a little bit of a problem with us naming what sports kids can and cannot place up into. You know, I think it seems a little hypocritical, especially in this district where we talk about not gatekeeping and that we have open opportunities for all, but yet in sports, we're talking about how you may only play up in golf, gymnastics, swimming, and wrestling because we don't offer that at the middle level. And I'm going to tell you why I disagree with that. I mean, outside of that as well, is that the kids that live in this town, there are some of them who are extraordinary athletes, and a middle school placement for sports is not appropriate for them. they should be playing up. Again, I coached in Garden City for 17 years. I took middle school athletes on my winter track team when there was a middle school team, but only those kids who were going to be scorers who were appropriately placed. We've had 8th graders make the varsity lacrosse team in Garden City, which, I mean, they're one of the best lacrosse teams in the state. Most school districts allow middle school students, regardless of sport, to play up with a contingency, like you're going to be a starter, you're going to be X, Y, and Z. I just don't really think it's right to name these sports to say like, well, because we have these at the middle school, you couldn't do this, but your peer, because we don't have that sport, they can. I don't think that's equitable. And I also just don't think it speaks into the talents that some of our kids have. And what my preference would be that we take the gates off of that. And if we do have a child, and it's probably going to be few and far between, who does have the ability to play up, I don't know why we would say no. That just feels hard for me, especially again when we push all of our children into accelerated classes without asking them about their readiness. It just seems very hypocritical to me. So that's why I asked for the policy to be raised, and that's my opinion on it. And especially as we move through budget season, we can never predict what sports will and will not run. So if we cut one of these sports, are we going to have to open the policy back up again and cross it back out? I mean, I think these are just things I don't like having the sports in there.
Anyone else?
I mean, if we wanted to change the language to not specify the sports and just say if there is not a team at the middle school level, I mean, that could be an option. I know that doesn't really change the crux of what you're saying, but the philosophy, at least, of the athletic department is that the teams at the high school level should be first and foremost filled by high school athletes. And yes, perhaps there is a middle school child, few and far between, who theoretically could compete, but that being in the high school, you should have that opportunity as a high school student to be part of your high school team and not have that taken away necessarily by, that's just a philosophical approach. I don't know beyond that where we,
I'll speak for myself. If Mr. McGuire vetted this and is not recommending a change, for me, I'm not looking to go against Mr. McGuire. I have faith and trust in him. If he didn't feel like it needed to be changed, then I will back him on that.
He's not recommending change other than the winter track.
Okay. So we can remove the sports, we can look at the language, we can keep it at stage 1. Ms. Hackett, do you have an opinion?
I would agree about removing the sports for the reason of not needing to reopen the policy anytime that there might
That's
be
fine.
a change in sport. I don't know if I am ready to, this is the first time I'm hearing
Yeah.
the philosophical kind of
That's fine.
change, so I don't know if I'm ready to have an opinion. I would hold it
So
then
Ms.
if we need to
Celebrity
have
will
another
hold this one at
conversation.
stage 1 as well, please, and then we will remove the language of the specific sports for next time, okay? Thank you. Currently at stage 2, we have 1620 annual reorg meeting.
Right, this was just changing the date to be in compliance with state.
Yeah, we looked at this last time, so are we okay to move this to stage 2 at the next meeting? Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Gavin, opportunity for superintendent.
Thank you. I'd like to use my opportunity for superintendent's report tonight to share a couple of essential changes that we believe are necessary to strengthen New York State's foundation aid formula so that it more accurately reflects current educational costs, regional realities, and student need. So this conversation is a follow-up to the conversation that I and several local superintendents had with Judy Griffin, who was absolutely wonderful and has always been an advocate for us, and continues the conversation that we will have with both Senator Bino, who's our local state senator, as well as Scott Davis, who's always, again, a Rockville Center advocate through and through. Rockville Center is committed to providing a high-quality educational opportunities for all students. Yet we continue to face rising contractual, operational, and mandated costs that outpace our ability to raise revenue. It is increasingly important that today's state's primary aid mechanism reflect what it truly costs to educate students, particularly in our region, Nassau County, today. For Rockville Center, the regional cost index is the most critical component for the foundation aid formula. Our district operates in a high-cost, high-density labor market where salaries, benefits, and transportation, vendor pricing, and service contracts are significantly higher than in many other parts of the state. The current regional cost index does not fully capture these realities. realities, resulting in state aid calculations that understate the true cost of delivering services and programs here in Nassau County. Modernizing the regional cost index, ensuring it accurately reflects current wages, housing costs, and cost of living pressures, and updating it regularly would be a meaningful step towards a formula that is fair, current, and grounded in today's economic conditions. For Rockville Center, foundation aid reform must also recognize that the true cumulative cost of meeting students' needs has risen. At the same time, over the past decade, our enrollment has declined by 288 students, approximately 8%. Yet our obligation to provide mandated services and maintain appropriate program has not declined proportionally and in many cases continues to increase. At the same time, the gap between allowable revenue growth and actual costs has widened significantly. While our tax cap has increased only 9.3% over the last 5 years, inflation during that same period has increased approximately 21%. Even with declining enrollment, our cost drivers continue to accelerate, with the cost of meeting the needs of all of our learners projected to rise by approximately $2.5 million next year, and employee health insurance costs projected to increase by roughly an additional $2 million. Finally, the foundation formula should take a more realistic and balanced approach to assessing local wealth and fiscal capacity. While property values in Rockville Center have increased, that does not offset the rapid growth in costs that all of our taxpayers face. In addition, districts are navigating uncertainty in terms of federal funding, with including the ongoing possibility that federal grant awards may be reduced, modified, or simply continued. The state should ensure that districts like Rockville Center are not penalized simply because property values are strong, particularly when rising costs, mandated services, and unpredictable external revenue streams place significant pressures on our local budget. We have been working with our local legislators to address these issues and feel that we have put forward reasonable proposals as a group of superintendents that would provide districts with needed relief. That's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Gavin. And just to echo what we said at the last meeting as well, we as a board will continue to advocate. Judy Griffin and Scott Davis in particular have been wonderful supporters, all of our local legislators. If you're going to ask in terms of the community what you can do to help us is to make sure that they know what we're advocating for, which is more fair and accurate system and reflective of everything that we've talked about up here. Okay, opportunity for board members. Ms. Messier.
Thank you. I've been going back and forth about what I wanted to talk about tonight. I think, the families who live in Rockville Center expect excellence. Our motto is excellence in education. That's what we are here for. We are here to provide an excellent education. I'm frustrated by a lot of things. I wish we weren't in the budget predicament that we were in. I wish there was an easy fix to this, and it doesn't feel like there's really going to be. So that's one level of frustration. I'm also frustrated with our academic outcomes, specifically at the high school, and midterms over the past few weeks have kind of just re-raised this for me. And I know I've communicated this to you in email, to both you, Mr. Gavin, and to Ms. Barry, but I'm having a really hard time reconciling with the results on some of our midterms, specifically one of our science midterms. Over the past 2 years, I've asked numerous times about our preparation in science. The standards changed, and it didn't seem like there was any major changes that were taking place here. There are members of the community who are professionals, who are science teachers, who have also raised these concerns. And time again, I feel like I'm told we're prepared, we're ready, we're ready. And we gave a midterm, first time for this new curriculum, and the results were horrifying. They were terrible. And the people who are suffering for this now are the kids. And I cannot understand how we can sit and look at this exam and say the exam was fair or the instruction was aligned and appropriate. There's a gap somewhere. I don't know where the gap is because I'm not here, I don't teach here, I don't supervise here. But there is a gap, and as a teacher for 22 years on a locally designed assessment, we would give tests. If there was one question that a lot of kids got wrong, we threw the question out because there must be something wrong with either the question or the instruction. You have an exam where your average was barely passing, and this is going to go into these children's average. It is going on their report card. I know colleges don't see the report card, but it gets funneled into their average, and it is not right and it is not fair. And I asked that the midterm be thrown out. And I get that I'm one voice, and my voice doesn't really matter. I get that. But I can't in good conscience sit on a board of education that has oversight for a district when concerns were raised, results were poor, and now kids are suffering for it. And again, I don't know how we got here. I don't know if it's administrative. I don't know where it starts and where it ends. But I can't sit here and not say anything about it because it's not right. And that's all I have to say.
All right, so a couple of things in terms of the midterm that you're talking about. Number one, I will ask Mr. DiTomaso to talk a little bit about the steps that we've taken in terms of trying to prepare in terms of curriculum. But then also, I think it's important for everyone to know is that, yes, there is a new Regents that we expect in science for this year. The midterm that was designed this year was designed along the lines of that, what those expectations would be. So yes, our students did struggle with a couple of things. And one thing I think we can get better at, and we all acknowledge, is that the review materials that were handed out by several of our people were different. So we are going to get better at making sure our review materials are better. In terms of the actual results, after we have typically curved our midterms exams. And so when we looked at the curve from last year and the curve from this year, they were relatively the same. And the results in terms of the average was the same as well. Finally, I just want to make sure that people know that we have also been doing our research in terms of what other districts have faced when they took the new exam last year. So some districts opted to take it last year, some districts opted to take it for this year. We have opted to take it for this year because we didn't know what was coming or we wanted to see what came out. One of the things we can anticipate are the questions that we put on the midterm this year are things that our students are going to see. So we wanted to make sure that our students could see questions like this on their midterm so that they are prepared when the time comes in terms of the exam. The other thing that I wanted to just point out was that that was what the curve was for. So typically speaking, if we give questions on the midterm, we adjust the curve that if we find out that something didn't work out well or we have a particular question, our students do well, we have curved. We have curved the midterms before. We have curved midterms not only in science, but we have curved midterms in other things as well, in other subject areas as well. But John, do you want to talk just briefly really about what we've done to prepare?
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. I really do. I understand. I think these new courses are difficult when they come out, right? Whether it's biology or it's changes in U.S. history, if you're dealing with U.S. history. Looking back over the last 2.5 years, I'm not here for 2.5 years. But looking back over 2.5 years, it seems that the teachers and not just biology, but I'm going to say chemistry and all those areas where tests have been changed, that there's been robust meetings and they've been involved. Now, we could debate whether or not, those were particularly effective. I tend to think that they were over the last 2.5 years. I can only speak to what's happened this year. I know that teachers in various areas have asked for release time to work on things together. I know they've started the collegial circle. I'm confident in Dr. Walsh. She is the science leader in the high school, along with Mr. Guy Riccardi, that they're going to make those, adjustments as they move forward. I've been in, conversations, particularly over the last month, and how it's going to be a little bit more intensive in our expectations. But I'm confident that kids are going to do well. Nobody wants kids, the community's kids, to do well on these exams more than themselves, but their teachers as well. They take great pride in this, right? They want their kids to do well, and it's our job to provide those teachers everything they need to be successful. I think we're doing that. I do. I mean, again, I don't have the history, but I certainly have what I see now, right? I think teachers are dedicated here. I've observed 50 teachers over the course of my 6 months here, and it's joyous to me to see the kind of teaching I'm seeing as a resident and as an educator for 35 years. But you're right. You make good points. I think everyone here should expect the best.
Can I also add to my list of wants? Can I please get, with redacted names, the second quarter average of every child in biology and what they got on their midterm? I don't need the names. I just want to see what the quarter average is and how that aligns to what they got on the midterm. because I'm hearing like a lot of students that have like 98 averages that got like a 63 on the midterm. So that's what I would just like to see, the alignment. If the midterm, because if that midterm reflects the instruction and the unit assessments, we really shouldn't have much more than like a 5-point gap. So if I could get that, that would be great. Or the board could get that. Thank you.
You'll provide that in a nightly. Thank you. Mrs. Hackett?
Start off with some positive things. The Frozen production at the middle school was fantastic. Our students are amazing. Congratulations to everybody involved in that. I wish all of the girls in red and blue good luck as they move through their process. They seem to be enjoying. And a thank you to the Booster Club for holding their bash. I had to personally miss it this year, but what they do for our students and what they raise money for and support our students as an organization is really very appreciated by us, and we're really grateful for that work. I know the Ed Foundation has their annual gala coming up. They also support this district so well. So I hope we support them because we are so student-driven and these organizations are doing great work. Thank you to the PTAs for letting us come do our mid-year reviews. We're looking forward to coming to your PTA meetings. We are making ourselves available outside of this to come on our budget roadshows coming up so that we can come into your buildings and answer your questions as we move through this process. As I mentioned earlier, I hope you stick with us. I've been on this board a long time. We've had some really big challenges. I can tell you I've been here for many of them. I've been in leadership roles on the board. I ask that we stick together as we move through it, and we will get you what you want. We are a district full of amazing people, both staff, faculty, administrators, and our children, and our parents, and our community. So we care about every single individual here. No decisions are made in a vacuum. None of them are made lightly. I know we personally take it on, administration's personally taking this on. So just want to reiterate how much we care and, care what you have to say. I appreciate so many people showing up. I wish we had this every meeting, to be honest, because the community matters to us. So I just ask that you stick with us, and we're stronger together. So hopefully we can make some strides and figure out the best way to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Gruner?
So I'm just going to address sort of the elephant in the room. I'm looking out over a sea of frustrated, scared, disgruntled, questioning faces. I'm sure it doesn't make you feel any better that we're sitting up here and don't have great answers. I think the unfortunate reality of this side of the table is the easy questions are easy, right? You don't really need even decisions to be made. It's at the moments when things are hard or challenging, or different people have different perspectives on what should be done and how it should be done. And the best we can promise you is we will listen to everyone, and we will try to do the very best we can for everyone. That includes students, that includes teachers. So many teachers are sitting here saying, how can this be happening? How am I potentially not going to be able to come back to work at a place I love? Families are paying taxes and wondering why we're in the position. And I get all of that. And there's not, I know it's easy to be looking for one thing to fix or one reason. I think the fact of the matter is the problem is multifaceted. And, the best I can say is we will do our very best to try to consider all the angles as we're making unpleasant decisions. I mean, there's no sugarcoating that. But in the end, we're really trying to still provide the best education that is open to all the things that students need and want. And I think before I got on the board and before Mr. Gavin got here, one of the main criticisms against the district was that it was a one-size-fits-all approach. And we've really tried hard to provide options to kids and try to listen to what is important to kids and to families. And we'll do the best we can to continue to do that. And that's the best we can offer at the moment, unfortunately. So.
Thank you. Dr. Downing?
It is a multifaceted problem, and we are looking at it from all the angles. As Trustee Gruner mentioned last week, We attended this New York State School Board conference that was specifically about the budget, and we learned that 461 districts, that's half of the districts in New York State, are no longer receiving state foundation aid based on the formula developed by the state itself. So that is a systemic problem when a formula that decides our state aid relies on enrollment numbers and our strong housing values, but it does not consider student needs and rising costs. We need to continue to urge, and we certainly ask everyone here who's listening to urge our elected leaders to step in to this state budget process and stop passing the burden of these increased school costs on to the taxpayers. We have to close our own budget gap. We will examine every possible option and work together to preserve the programs that we know are successful for our students. In this time of diminishing school funding, I echo Mrs. Hackett's thanks to the Booster Club and encourage everyone to come out and support the annual Rockville Center Education Foundation. They're having their event May 2nd. Now more than ever, we really appreciate these organizations that raise money for our students. Good luck to everyone in these weeks of red and blue, to all of our students who are busy with Literacy Week and Kindness Week, dances, plays, musical, Frozen, all kinds of extracurriculars. All of these activities are possible because of our dedicated teachers and our staff and our PTAs. And we are so grateful to you for the opportunities that our students enjoy because of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Downing. Opportunity for visitors. The public is reminded to address questions or remarks to the board through its president. Is requested to refrain from making any direct references to students or staff members that can be considered critical of their performance or their character. Such references to individual students or staff members are inappropriate in a public forum and should instead be conducted in private conversation with appropriate members of the staff. The public is asked to state their name and address, and please limit their comments to 3 minutes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Kristen Clancy, and I'm here as a representative of Hewitt School. So I am a 4th grade teacher at Hewitt. I'm also a resident and a parent of Rockville Center, but my role today is to highlight the wonderful things that we're doing at Hewitt. So here I go. So this year we launched the Star of the Inquiry units in our primary classes in kindergarten through 2nd grade. The inquiry units are created to foster critical thinking, problem solving, and deeper long-term conceptual understanding. In Rockville Center, our units were created in a way that aligned the grades throughout each inquiry, so K to 5, they're all aligned. Each unit uses interdisciplinary content to create connections between subject areas. This places the students at the center of the learning process. Each grade at Hewitt is participating in both school community, Rockville Center community, and environmental community experiences. Our kinder and 1st grade classes are continuing their collaboration with the Woodshop here at Southside High School, which is a wonderful program and collaboration that I have been privy to experience firsthand. To help enhance their curriculum, our 2nd graders will once again be taking their field trip around Rockville Center, visiting various businesses and municipal buildings. In Stellar, the 2nd graders are also creating community dioramas out of recycled materials. This project is a great segue into the 3rd grade Go Green Gala. The Go Green Gala is a wonderful event connecting music, art, Stellar, reading, and the classroom. The students learn about how to take care of our earth. They write poems, learn songs on the recorder, and create artwork using recycled materials in both art and Stellar. These projects come together during the Go Green Gala, which they present for their families. As part of our community partnership with Backyard Players and Friends, Hewitt School has teamed up with Love Nana Community Service Project. Some of our 4th and 5th grade and our RISE class have gone on field trips to this nonprofit organization and are actively practiced giving back to their community. The 4th grade classes are also having their very first wax museum, which we're very excited about. We are currently reading, researching, and writing about an influential person in history, influential for the students. They were able to choose anyone they wanted. And this is being done in class during our reading time, in small group reading, and during Stellar. This project will culminate with a wax museum event where our 4th grade parents will come to Hewitt to interact with these historical figures. Finally, the 5th graders were enlightened by a visit from Marion Luzon, a Holocaust survivor, and looking forward to having a visit with Sam Mahara this spring. Mr. Mahara is an internment camp survivor. Both Ms. Lazan and Mr. Mahara come to speak with our fifth grade classes about experiences they had as children during this time in history. These assemblies bring World War II to life with firsthand accounts of this time period. It is a wonderful and touching experience for all of the students. For the second year in a row, the Backyard Players will be visiting Hewitt for a dance assembly in celebration of Autism Acceptance Month. This is an event all of the students love. We are looking forward to another great collaborative experience that promotes inclusivity. On top of all the amazing programs, community collaborations, and academics happening at Hewitt each day, we are currently celebrating Kindness Week. So I encourage everyone to celebrate Kindness Week. During this time, we are having fun with Spirit Days and holding Hewitt Pride. On behalf of Hewitt, we would like to thank the community for their support, the Board of Education, our administrators, for their unique and enriching experience we are able to offer to all of our students.
Thank you, Mrs. Clancy.
Roxanne Rizzi, 55 Kennedy Avenue. As financial literate adults, we often have to make difficult decisions in our homes. It is time for the district to do the same. I proposed the Princeton model to Mr. Gavin 3 years ago, and the response was, in this district, every school is like a little castle, and no one wants to give up their castle, verbatim. And so, in order to save money, castles need to go away, okay? That's not who we are. We're here for children. So, you're spending money for greenhouse. I believe we don't own the basement that they're in. You're spending money, giving money to the JCC for pre-K. You're paying the other Jewish center to the temple to use some of their rooms for Wilson. So how about we move the administrative office to Riverside, because there's very few children there. Make that a UPK and K center. Parents should love it because every one of their children will go there, so they all have ownership. And then you don't have to close any schools. 2 schools get to be whatever the number is, 1, 2, 3, and the other one gets to be 4, 5. So if it's Wilson and Covert, there are 1, 2, 3 and a 4, 5, or 1, 2 and a 3, 4, 5. And the same on the other side. Other districts are doing this because they know that they can't afford to do it the way they've been doing it. And it's not okay not to have the difficult conversations. We're parents, we're taxpayers, and you need to be better stewards of our money. It's my understanding that Riverside, it's costs like $15,000 more per student because you have to have teachers there, but you don't have the number of students there. Unacceptable. Erica asked what the number is for special ed out of district. It was told to me that it's 71%. I don't know how that could be, but I would like to know as a taxpayer, how many children are out of district and why don't we have the services here? Maybe we don't have for one. I have a child lives on my block. Maybe we don't have for that child. But why don't we have self-contained? Why aren't we meeting the needs of the children in our district? It's unacceptable to ship them somewhere else and pay money to another district. When you have capable people here, people don't have to lose their job if you do the uncomfortable things. It's not always fun. It's not always pleasant. But you get to keep some money in your pocket, and you get to use these buildings the way that you're supposed to. I can't say another reason why I should give $1 more to this district to do less. Oftentimes, I tutor children in the district who have the averages that don't meet the test grades. So do better and start now.
One clarification, Ms. Dalton, we do have self-contained classes in our district, correct? I just want to make that clear for the record. Thank you.
That is correct. We have multiple self-contained classes, different size ratios, and we've expanded them in the last 2 years that I've been here. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Carnival, 21 Norcross Street, Rockville Center. I lead the Rockville Center Special Education Partners. I am part of PTA Council, and I'm here with many members of our leadership team and our special education community. Last year, several of us had a privilege of serving on the district's strategic planning committee. We spent countless hours shaping the mission and vision of the Rockville Centre School District. I want to remind everyone of the vision this community adopted after deep reflection. The Rockville Centre Public School District envisions an inclusive learning community where every student discovers their unique potential and emerges as a confident, creative, and principled individual prepared to excel in an evolving world. In recent weeks, that vision has been compromised. Families have come to us hurt and alarmed by divisive language used to describe our students. Referring to any group of children as high cost or very expensive suggests blame, as if certain students are responsible for budget cuts, program changes, or teachers being accessed. This rhetoric does not reflect an inclusive community. It isolates special education students and fuels division in our community. It also ignores a fundamental truth: special education is not optional. It is a legal mandate under New York State law to provide a free and appropriate public education. These students are not budget lines to be trimmed. They are children entitled to services. To our board members, I have long admired anyone willing to serve in this role. You volunteer countless hours and take on responsibilities far beyond fiscal oversight. According to the district's own website, when you took this role, you committed to expanding access to varied coursework, extracurriculars, and support services. In recent years, we've seen your enthusiasm for more than 40 new high school courses and several new sports teams. Our special education community is now asking for that same level of commitment and enthusiasm to ensure that the special education support services are properly managed and strengthened. Our leadership team has been reviewing district budgets from 2019 to 2025 that are available on the Rockville Centre website. We have heard repeated claims that special education costs are rising, but this data tells a more nuanced story. Special education consistently represented about 15 to 15.5% of the total budget from 2019 to 2023. In the last 2 years, although the overall budget has grown, special education shares have actually decreased to roughly 13.5% of the total budget. We respectfully ask the board to review the numbers and help the community understand why special education continues to be named so loudly as a primary and rising budget concern. While we understand the district graduated 8 tuition-based students last year, a change that should have been anticipated across several budgets, a decrease in revenue does not automatically translate into an increase in expenditures. Additionally, at last month's Board of Education meeting, we saw a projection for next year showing a dramatic increase in out-of-district placement costs to $6,379,350. A 71% increase over the last 2 years based on the actual 2024-2025 spending of $3,728,760 seen on that same slide. Any 71% jump in a single budget line demands scrutiny. We are asking the board to provide a clear, itemized explanation of this projection. We also ask for the approved special education budgets and final actual costs for the last 4 years so the community can better understand whether these costs have historically been overestimated. We would then appreciate clarification of what happens to any remaining special education funds at year's end. On the other hand, if this 71% increase is accurate, we must confront a very difficult question. Why is Rockville Centre sending more and more students out of district? If our programs cannot meet students' needs, then the solution is not to blame the children, it is to strengthen the programs. We urge the district to consider bringing in an outside agency to audit and restructure the special education department so we can meet students' needs within our own schools. Only then can Rockville Centre truly become the inclusive learning community it claims to envision, the one where every student discovers their potential. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michael Schwartz, 6 Wyndham Road. I don't have a prepared speech. I only found out about this meeting at about 6:30 when I was having dinner while watching News 12. So this is going to be kind of short. I grew up here. I went to school here. My children grew up here and went to school here. I have been to other budget meetings in past years. I hear the rock and a hard place that you all find yourself in, and I'm thinking part of it is due to the, I think you should be thinking of this meeting the next time there is a negotiation with the school teachers. You're up against it as far as income or revenue from the state, and I understand that, and hopefully that can be addressed. All of us should be calling our state assemblymen and senators and saying something about this, and the governor. They should hear from all of us. But the next time there is a school budget negotiation with the teachers and the administrators, this meeting should be kept in mind. When I went to school here, it was a while ago. I graduated in the 70s. My senior graduating class, I believe, was about 315 students. There was a principal and an assistant principal. I'm guessing that the senior class now is no more than 315 students.
Correct.
How many assistant principals are here now? 4? Well, we had 1. There are probably more programs that are mandated now than decades ago, but 4? Again, something to think about. Again, these are just my thoughts. I ran a successful business for more than 50 years. I'm familiar with balance sheets. I'm familiar with profit and loss. And I'm also familiar with keeping my costs in line with my revenues. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Shannon Lutz, 60 William Street, Rockville Center. How did you get here? It has unfortunately become so easy for me to place blame on this school district, and herein comes another. But tonight I also blame popularity contests and blind support of taxpayers who either don't have school-age children in this district, don't care about those of us who do, or didn't do their due diligence when not voting last May for the candidate who, due to his employment background, could have helped this district find ways to save money. Well, here we are. As the concerned mother of an intellectually gifted public school student who already gets virtually no special academic support programming, these cuts are very concerning to me. MTSS is meant for students who need academic support. This is supposed to include students who struggle, but also students who are bright. That is not what happens in this school district. I taught gifted in New York City for many years. What this district does, or rather what they do not provide for elementary age children who need enrichment, is an embarrassment. Please spare me with the enrichment for all approach. Our neighboring districts do so much more for their bright students. The schools and teachers can only do so much without Tier 3 programming and support from you. I am grateful for their efforts, but you are failing my child, and worse, I'm allowing it because my little boy doesn't want to leave his friends. I can't bear to think of how much more this budget deficit will negatively impact my child. As the concerned mother of a parochial school student, whose school is supported by staff in this district by way of their school nurse and related services, resource room, school psychologist, OT, PT, speech, etc. These cuts are very concerning to me, both private and public respectively. If you're planning on increasing the number of children these providers see at once as part of your Hail Mary here, just keep in mind doing so will be a disservice to the children who need those services. I am an educated consumer in respect to education, Mr. Gavin. You told me that once. And I am interested to see what your big plan is. Parents, please pay attention and do not allow them to do this to your children. So again, I ask, how did you get here with what we pay in school taxes? Some ideas: renting out space for students in the district to attend UPK, renting space for older students who have challenges that this district was not equipped to handle in-house, a building for administrative offices, an elementary school with low enrollment that likely has extra space for some of the aforementioned points. And no, I'm not suggesting to put high school students in a building with young children. Music rooms and art rooms, sure, they're nice, and no teacher wants art in a cart, but it can be done. That's how we find space in the city. Creating a job title with a salary raise for an administrator who was on his way toward retirement, that poof, presto, we seem to no longer need that position. More new and exciting electives, clubs, or teams at the high school, which, believe me, I don't want to take from children, but I mean, something's got to give. Assuming cuts are going to be made, where are you planning to make them? Homeowners in this district buy houses for their children to attend the schools. If I had to do it again, I'm not so sure I'd make the same choice, one that I was proud to make 9 years ago. Please do better for our kids. And parents, if you're home listening, I'd like to end with, I have 3 young children at home, the youngest with a vile stomach virus, sorry everyone, a son who needed to get to basketball and a husband stuck at work. I had an event to attend tonight that was very important to me, but here I am and they are home with a sitter so that I can attend. I wish more of you would make the same choice instead of watching from home. There is something to be said about power in numbers, and our children are important. And I applaud all the parents that are here tonight, but this is not usually the case.
Thank you.
I I actually wasn't intending on saying anything, but no one else is bringing this up. All the scenarios that you
Sorry, can you just state your name for the record?
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
Keith
That's
Barrett,
okay.
Marlboro Court.
Thank you.
All the scenarios that you brought up, they assume a 2% inflation increase, which was stated by Ms. Rehak. There was, I don't know where you got that from. I know that Fed wants 2% as a goal, but we haven't had 2% or anything like it in 6 years. We need to have, I don't know if a consultant was used to derive this or where you got that from, but that's what we're sort of basing these, these different things on. So we don't know what it is. We need to project the next year's inflation by taking the last 5 years, maybe make a prediction based on that and the curve, right? And then if you find out the real expected inflation to your expenses, you got to take an action based on that. You'll probably need to raise taxes more than stated and also cut resources, or else we're going to be in the same place next year. Right. That's what it comes down to. I just want to make sure everyone understands that we are going to be in exactly the same place this year, no matter which one of those options are taken. So that's all I have to say, kind of. Let me see. We have less students, so we need less resources. So we should take that into consideration. And no state representative of any kind is ever going to feel bad for a community like Rockville Center. That's just never going to happen. So we need to figure this out on our own. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Rehak, do you mind addressing the question? Thank you.
Inflation rate comes from, the state sends it to us for the tax cap levy calculation. We don't set it.
And what is the inflation for your expenses, right?
Much higher, but that's the point. The inflation's much higher. We're limited to the lesser of inflation, or the 2%.
The scenarios up there aren't accurate. We're going to be, no matter what scenario you take, we're going to be exactly the same place next year as we are now. So as long as everyone knows that.
Thank you.
I am far from a rocket scientist, I can assure you, but Barry Hockhauser, 96 Shepherd Street, right down the street. Looking around, I could be the oldest one in the room, so I'm happy to say I do not have any kids in the school district, and I'm happier to say I've made my last college tuition payment, so.
Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This school district did my kids well, and there were tough budget votes in the past. We've always passed this piercing the cap, or whatever it's called, wasn't a thing, but every budget passed. And it passes because everybody in this room has chosen to be in Rockville Center, and has chosen to be in Rockville Center in part because of this school district. And is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. Has this board made every decision correctly? In my opinion, no, it hasn't. But the village of Rockville Center is a great place to live, and that was shown somebody had property values. Did I mention I'm a realtor at Remax? So if anybody's really unhappy, I'm here to help. But I support this board. I don't always agree with them. I support, as one of the board members said, the experts who make these decisions. I was an accounting major at NYU when it was called something other than the Stern School of Business. And the numbers are mind-boggling, especially on a PowerPoint screen, and especially going at the speed you were doing it. I encourage you not to get discouraged by the process, and you have my full support, and I will be voting yes on whatever budget comes down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Schwartz. I live at 256 Brower Avenue. As I was reviewing some things, in 2021, the Office of the State Comptroller audited the district's transparency regarding finances. They found RVC was not transparent and did not seem to have a multi-year financial plan in place. And so here we are. State aid and the rising costs mentioned aside, what are the costs that have put us in this trepidatious situation? Are there legal fees and lawsuits that taxpayers do not know about? Are there failed employment contracts we're still paying on? There have been many, many mistakes made here, and no one up here is transparent or accountable. I would like to see the figures today compared to 10 years ago regarding the growth of administration. We have lost 288 children over the past 10 years. Teachers' positions have been lost due to attrition, and the teachers are the only ones on the chopping block. They were told, it was reported to me at a meeting, that their jobs were on the line. No administrators, I believe there are 32 in the district and probably growing, that no administrators' jobs would be on the line. That cannot be part of the plan. Educators are the people who directly impact our children every day. Administrators don't, I'm sorry, but that is the truth. I also believe administrators have received salary increases. I'm unsure if that is true. I will definitely check online. There's another point I had. Okay, thank you for clarifying that, actually. So there has to be a different part of the plan than just teachers being cut, okay? I know there are a lot of people in this district who are creative, out-of-the-box thinkers. I'm just going to put in one last final plug. I think this could be a time that we start to think about really moving from IB to AP. I would love to see the cost of IB. I can definitely speak to AP. It is relatively inexpensive to have teachers prepared for AP. AP classes, regions are closely aligned with AP classes. So if you're preparing children for an AP class, you are essentially getting them prepared for the regions. Also, your rankings as taxpayers are directly impacted by the number of students who take AP exams. Not how well they do, which is also interesting, but how many actually sit and take the exam. Thank you so much for your time. I really hope you can do better.
Mr. Gavin, can you address a couple of things? Number one, I'm going to ask that in the instructional, I'm sure this is going to be part of the instructional presentation anyway, but IB costs and will be included. Can you address the number of current administrators that we have and any other answers that you have right now? Thank you.
Sure. So in terms of the number of administrators, we have 23 administrators in the district. When I started here, we had 23. We still have 23. In terms of the actual increase, so a gentleman referenced that we had one assistant principal in the 70s. While I can't verify that to be true, but I can tell you that we have 4 right now. So I do want to talk about, and what he talked about was, I'm sure there are more programs that need to be overseen. And we heard from some of our people that commented tonight that, yes, we have 40 new classes over the past few years. So we have increased options for kids. In terms of what the teachers were told, the teachers were not told that they were the only ones that were going to face potential reductions. We talked about every unit facing potential reductions, including administrators, and the teachers in the room that were in that room can verify that. So I did not say only teachers are going to be reduced. That is not true at all. In terms of how people get raises based on contracts. So each and every time we talk about contracts, we talk about what our contractual obligations are. So our contractual obligations go up every year. So every member of every bargaining unit that we have here in the district has a raise built in a multi-year contract over time. The only people that don't have multi-year contracts or raises built in or can be changed quickly are the administrators that are sitting up here today. And if you looked at one of the slides, we talked about how the administrators up here, in terms of central office and cabinet, have already said that, and given the space that we're in, we've already agreed to and proposed a salary freeze for the cabinet. So that was part of the presentation last week. It was on a slide before. I don't know if people have, actually, we didn't speak to it, so I want to make sure that that's the case. Every one of our principals and assistant principals, directors are all in a unit, and that unit has a contract, and that contract is an obligation that we have to live up to. All of our teachers, our teacher assistants, are all in a multi-year contract that has contractual raises. We have to live up to those. All of our teacher aides, security guards, all of our custodians, our clerical, are all in collective bargaining units with contracts, multi-year, that we have to live up to. So when Ms. Rehak talks about what our contractual obligations are and how they grow, they continue to grow. One of the reasons that we have planned into this is because each and every year we have reduced staff through attrition. One of the comments was, have we reduced staff over attrition in terms of headcount? We have each year. And that is one of the reasons why we were able to close a $3.5 million gap last year. So in terms of that, yes, you're 100% right that we can't always foresee what the 2% inflation is going to be, and we know that we're bound to that by what the state's allowing us to raise in terms of taxes, but that's not the actual condition on the ground. 100%, we recognize that. And I think if we go back to one of the presentation slides that Ms. Rehak talked about, and yes, she did talk fast, she's very fast, she's good, she's smart. But when she talks about you saw the big spike in inflation relative to what the tax cap could be. So I wanted to make sure that is a slide that if people want to see what that difference is, they can see what that difference is.
But the cost to the school will probably even higher than 8%. Right? I mean, that's 8% nationwide.
100%, yes. Yeah. So in response to that, I'll give you an example. Construction cost. Construction costs didn't go up 8%. Construction costs have gone up 30 to 50%. So if we were going to pave a blacktop 5 years ago, it's one cost. Now it's 30 to 50% higher. So all of these things need to get done. We've paved blacktops here at some of our elementary schools. We've added roofs to buildings. All of those things, if you think about where they were 5 years to now, that's why Ms. Rehak is talking about the importance of capital. Because when we don't have good facilities, that comes in cost in other ways, in terms of repairs, in terms of accidents or anything else like that. So that's why we make sure that we try to make, and what I mean by an accident is somebody steps on a crack or something like, so in terms of that. So we want to make sure that we have facilities that don't allow those things to happen. So I just wanted to address the fact that no, there aren't 30 administrators here. That is not accurate. That the number of administrators since I've been here is the exact same when I started as it is right now. In terms of, have we switched positions? We have. Okay? In terms of teaching positions, we're down about 8 positions since I'm here. Down about 8 positions district-wide. In terms of teaching assistants, we're down dramatically more than that. Again, through attrition. Through attrition. I did not go to anybody and ask anybody to be excessed. The only person, there's only been one excess in my time here, and that's been an administrator, and that was last year. So that was an administrative position that we saw that we needed to adjust because of the $3.5 million gap, which we did. So everyone in this room that was in the room on Monday when I met with the teachers can tell you, I told them every unit was going to be affected by this. And you could see the nods from the teachers that are behind you. So in terms of that, that is what we face now. We need to make sure that we are preparing a budget, like I said before, that keeps students in mind, that keeps the needs of students in mind. So Ms. Carnival's comment about in terms of how do we support our special education students, we support our special education students. No one up here is going to advocate for a program that does not meet mandated needs. That won't be a recommendation from me, and I'm sure that I can speak on behalf of the board that that will not be a recommendation from the board. So I want to make clear, we might have to deliver things slightly differently. There might be, instead of 4 kids in a co-teaching class, there might be 7. But in terms of that, that's the way we have to schedule. And we will meet our mandate. So I want everyone to understand that clearly, because I've said it not only to the teachers, I've said it here 2 weeks ago, and I'll say it here again. No one is advocating to change or not meet mandates in terms of special education students. Thanks. Wasn't expecting that, but thank you, Barry. Jackie,
you.
Is there anything else you wanted to add?
And is that good for the kids? 7 instead of 4? Is that good for them?
Would anyone else like to come up to the mic? Okay, thank you. May I have a motion? Oh. Sure.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Marlene McConey, 55 Andover Road. I'm a parent of both an in-district student and an out-of-district parochial school student. I didn't foresee myself at the podium tonight, but given that there has been very little discussion about foreseeability during this process, I would like to say a few words. So thank you for the presentation and for the opportunity to do so. I think it's clear tonight that this community is looking for an explanation outside of the external factors that are being discussed. An explanation as to why reserves were allowed to trend downward while expenses were clearly out of control. A last-minute warning, devoid of any accountability after what amounts to over 15 years of financial mismanagement, is a disservice to all the members of this community, including many of us who have been up at the podium before anticipating a crash like this. A lot of us thought that this was not only going to be likely, given the way that we were spending, but inevitable. I would like to know personally, where is the accountability for long-term planning? A $3.7 million gap doesn't happen overnight. So while external factors like inflation, decreases in aid, rising costs of insurance, and declining enrollment are obviously at play, they should come as no surprise. Let's look at the internal math. And I've gotten these numbers from budget documents and filings that the district has made directly to the state. So from years 2010 to 2011, our budget was approximately $23.5 million. So compare that to years 2025 to 2026, where the spending plan was $139.39 million. I'm going to mention also that in 2010, when I came to this community, Southside High School was ranked as the 46th best high school in the entire country by U.S. News and World Report. I think that put us in the top of all of Long Island. Years 2025 to 26, Southside High School was ranked number 611 by the same publication. This is a notable shift from number 46 ranking in 2010. But what this also means is that during the same time that our budget went up by 50%, our rankings went down by 1,228%. We've been tied to an inclusive learning plan that has become a one-size-fits-all policy. A lot of people have spoken about that tonight. While the intent may have been good, and it is good in practice at many levels, forcing every student into the same mold has caused major issues, especially in the special education realm. It's an expensive, inflexible model that doesn't fit the needs of all of our students, special ed and gen ed alike. It also leads to litigation and overspending on out-of-district solutions, yet the district refuses to adjust. The bottom line is that we are overspending on a system that isn't working for all of our students. And now the taxpayers and students are the ones that are paying the price for the administration's refusal to pivot. Now, if you consider that the district has been tied to old debt without having secured new capital funding in over a decade, you'll also understand why this was the perfect storm and not the external factors that everybody's been talking about the past 3 weeks. We haven't taken out a bond since 2013, yet we are still paying back $5 million every year and draining the operating budget every year for repairs and facilities. By using the day-to-day operating budget for capital updates of our repairs, buildings, we are and have been stripping funds away from classrooms, students, and teachers. Even now, when it's time to think outside the box, the solutions that have been presented are juvenile, quite frankly, and completely inadequate, given what this community contributes to revenue and what we expect from our administrators. We know that a bond is now out of the question, given that our credit rating is such that it's going to impact us in a negative way. I mean, I don't know how we would be able to pay back any interest if we have a $3.7 million budget deficit, but cutting teaching staff is not the answer, and neither is piercing the tax cap. I just want to end that our children and taxpayers and teachers deserve answers and creative solutions. Thank you.
Ms. Riak, you'll continue updating us on the capital piece in your presentation. You'll continue including the capital piece in the presentations as well. Thank you. May I have a motion to approve consent agenda M1 through 08?
So moved.
Second? Second. Any questions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Our next meeting is February 26th, and that will be a public work session. Have a good evening.